And so today my talk is going to be about sort of more collaborative, as opposed to here's what I've done. It's more about here's things I worry about and things I'm thinking about, and possible ways forward when it comes to doing future research in empirical corporate finance. So that brings me to my three observations. I've got sort of three quick talks, all mushed together, all stitched together. One is a quick empirical assessment of where we are in empirical corporate finance. I asked, secondly, has finance forgotten about taxes? I'm pretty sure taxes were present at the beginning, the academic days of the discipline. And then I will finish with some remarks on executive pay. These three topics go from macro to micro, from the large to the small, and looking at the black box from the outside, to digging around and poking at the edges of the black box in the middle, and then going inside the black box when it comes to organization design. So that's my plan. And the first question on that list is, how successful is the literature, absolutely and relatively, in empirical corporate finance? And what are the components of success, and then potential opportunities for future work? So what Frank Lee and Frank is at Western Ontario. Frank and I have assessed 20 different subfields, 20 different empirical experiments with the same econometric approach, so we have a sort of a level playing field comparison. And we have 6 classes of explanatory variables. Observe manager characteristics, observe firm characteristics, time fixed effects, manager fixed effects, firm fixed effects, and explanatory, of course, is in quotes because the residual is an element of our explanatory power too. So it just depends how you normalize the proportion of variation explained, whether you're normalizing by all of variation and the two variables to be explained, or whether you are normalizing by the explained variation. So here are the experiments. We have 8 classes of experiments, and those are 20, but the 8 classes are listed for you. So, for example, I have a strong interest in CEO pay, the level, the performance sensitivity, and the convexity of pay, the risk-taking incentives. We've got a fair amount of work on board independence, board size, and CEO duality. So anyway, those are some of the examples of the fields. So when it comes to identifying manager and firm fixed effects, this has not been an easy thing because a lot of times you don't have identification. One approach has been to have spell fixed effects, where you have a manager-firm match and include those fixed effects, but that doesn't separate the manager and firm fixed effects. Another way to get after this, to separate manager and firm fixed effects, another way is to look at movers only, executives who move. And so if you do those two approaches, well, the spell fixed effects, this is an early incarnation of our paper. We had 104,000 observations in the first approach, and if you went to movers only, you went to 10,000. I don't know about you, but I'm thinking, boy, there might be a little bit of selection issue there. And so, plus it's perhaps potentially imprecise and less informative, therefore. So we use AVOD, Kramart's, and Margolis's connected group method, which allows you to separate the manager and firm fixed effects. And so it's not possible to do this for all observations, but the general idea is that firms are connected through individual managers, and we'll look at top 5 named executive officers in US firms. And some of them move and some don't, but the variation generated by those who do move by mobile managers is used to identify the fixed effects of the mobile named executive officers, as well as the firms from which and to which they move, okay? And then once you do that, you can identify, as a group at least, the non-manager executives, fixed effects. All right, so it's not perfectly incisive, it's not that sharp an instrument if there's a large group of non-movers and only one mover, but it's better than what we had before. And in the old data, that got us up from 10,000 to 65,000, 65,000 observations, and in our latest empirical attempt at this, we have about 84,000 observations. So less of a selection issue, I would hope, and more precision. So here is an example of one of those 20 subfields. So this is based on the paper with Naveen and Lalitha, an excellent paper. Jim, I'm going to pick on you in a minute, but I want you to think I'm picking on you because I'm picking on us also already. So what we did was we took 20 different, in these 20 different subfields, we took sort of reasonably representative prominent papers in the discipline and collected all of the data, updated all of the data, and then ran several models. This is a graphical depiction of the model that includes all 6 types of variation. And so I would like to point out, Jim, I am going to pick on you in a minute. I'd like to pick out that the observable manager and firm characteristics, the blue and the purple parts of the bar, well, we had some explanatory power, even after including manager and firm fixed effects. Time fixed effects is minimal, and the residual, even with all of this kind of curve fitting, the residual is still substantial. Okay? But the point here is that when you include firm and manager fixed effects, there is clear empirical opportunity and theoretical opportunity for us in the profession. Those two pieces have significant power, explanatory power, and the opportunity here is to, especially for manager characteristics, the opportunity is to develop better proxies for the things that current theories identify as important, or perhaps develop individual theories of why certain manager characteristics would be important in terms of vega, and that's the variable that we considered here. So vega is basically convexity of pay. The idea is that vega would help you as a shareholder or as a comp committee and a board committee provide incentives for managers to implement positive NPV but risky projects that you would otherwise avoid because you're risk averse. Okay? So that is the type of experiment that we've been doing. If I normalize by the proportion of variation that actually is explained, so I take the residual out, here are the percentages that would be associated with the picture I showed you just a moment ago. Observable firm characteristics, 19.32%. Again, 9% on the managers, and the firm and manager fixed effects are substantial. I don't think anybody in this room is surprised that the manager characteristics are going to be most important, but this would be empirical verification that that is where perhaps we should be digging. All right, Jim. We picked Link, Netter, and Yang. I could have picked something that Lalitha and Naveen and I had done, but maybe your paper is better than ours. I really hate to admit that possibility, but at any rate, Jim's paper has gotten a lot of play and is viewed as an important contribution to literature. So, Jim, I'd like you to focus on the observable manager and firm explanatory power up there. And actually, when we run it on our paper, it's actually worse. But so if that helps you feel it all better, I hope it doesn't. But at any rate, if it does, good. So the firm and manager fixed effects, here's a case, board independence, where manager fixed effects are important. It invites us to look further in terms of managers, and firm fixed effects, actually that one's a lot larger here than in terms of vega, and so that's a place where you might go to understand more about the determinants of board independence. Now we have a little bit of a discussion here. Naveen, Lalitha, and I think maybe co-option wins the statistical horse race relative to board independence, but we don't know that for sure, and we'll see how that works out in the data. Okay, but this is basically that same recalculation. You look at the observables, and we're explaining maybe 3.5% with observables here if you include the fixed effects. So there's opportunity. There's clear opportunity when it comes to this particular subfield. So there's no way to parse this completely, but this is a representation of all the subfields. The thing I would like you to notice is that the sizes of the components of explanatory power here, and the residual is included here in orange, The sizes differ widely across the different subfields. And so is the red part, the component that would be firm fixed effects, where you might look. So some disciplines you should look hard at firm characteristics, other ones this tells you should look hard at managerial characteristics. So in terms of the overall conclusions from that, we have that observed firm characteristics do best in explaining CEO CEO pay level and in explaining market leverage, and they're lousy, just lousy at takeover defense as an outcome. So don't dig here. Observed manager, at least not yet. Observed manager characteristics have high power to explain CEO contract design, but I'm telling you to dig further there, and low power for firm focus, same measure per dollar segments, and low power for investment policy. So another conclusion is sort of bad news again. After 60 years of work on capital structure, is it 60 or about maybe more? After 60 years, fit ain't so good. So I'm going to point out to Mike Lemon, Michael Roberts, and Jamie Zender, their 08 paper. It was back to the beginning, is what they call it, I think, on capital structure. And they get an adjusted R-squared of about 0.2. You throw in firm fixed effects, but not manager fixed effects, you get to 0.66. In our case, we identify and add manager fixed effects, and that gets us to 0.74. So again, we need better proxies for the things we think are important, and better theories perhaps for identifying new things that likely to be important. Okay, the opportunity here that I would like to point to that picture with all of the color in it suggests, the opportunity is that including manager and fixed effects delivers much improved fit for dividend payout, propensity to adopt anti-takeover defenses, firm risk, board size, and firm focus, as I say here. And so an unobserved manager attributes deliver a high proportion of explained variation in the dependent variable for delta, board independence, board size, and vega, and for firm attributes, dividend payout, anti-takeover defenses, market leverage, and book leverage, and corporate cash flows. Okay, so that's it. We're trying to just, without saying papers are good or bad, we picked a few. Part of it is lower data collection costs, and I know we say this is a three observations talk, but we've got 1 million and some observations to generate the results in this paper. So Frank loved doing that. Frank was awesome. There is another point here that is important. Bad news was that when we start to include these things, these fixed effects, which are standard fixes for maybe omitted variables, other endogeneity problems, that affected in a material way inference based on the newly estimated parameters in 17 of the 20 subfields. So the things that we think we do know, perhaps we may not be so confident in that after doing this exercise, because the inferences in significant ways were changed in almost all of the empirical exercises. Okay. All right, talk number 2. Have we, as a discipline, set aside taxes? There's, in my view, still plenty to work on, and let me talk about 3 areas of interest, 2 of which we've got serious work on, and the other we don't. I want to say something about the corporate elasticity of taxable income, something about personal taxes and the level of executive pay, and something about personal taxes interacting with governance to shape corporate investment decisions. All right? So this is sort of the middle part, right? The very overarching start. This is where we're picking at the edges of the black box a little bit more, and then we'll go inside with compensation at the end. So the corporate elasticity of taxable income is relevant for shareholders, relevant for portfolio managers, accounting and accruals management, tax policy, economic activity. I saw a presentation a few minutes ago where the panel, which was discussing myopia and governance, was providing a lot of information about how private forms of organization will eclipse the public markets. Okay? And so what we are able to do is capture private and public firms in the U.S. because we have friends of the Treasury, the Department of Treasury, so we have tax returns on all of this. Historically, the literature has not paid much attention to the corporate elasticity of taxable income because the bulk of taxes, at least in the U.S., are paid from personal taxes. Okay? But that is certainly not a trivial amount of taxes paid by corporations, although what you hear today is that's what we have. But it's not true. And so we are trying to get at that with better data and better methods. So Gruber and Rao is really the prevailing estimate of the corporate elasticity of taxable income for the United States. And they use CompuStat data, and the accountants are all over this. They say you can't possibly define what taxes got paid and what the tax rate is and what taxable income is from CompuStat data. So there's a big discussion there. So at any rate, they did well, as the best they could do. The best paper I know on this is on UK data, and I don't know if you know the Devereux paper, but they use bunching methods, right? You tend to look at bunching like you might do with regression discontinuity designs, but you do it around, say, kinks in the corporate tax code to get a sense for what happens to taxable income when you shift from one marginal tax rate to another marginal tax rate. And so they get an elasticity of minus 0.57. They have better data, Treasury-like data. They use bunching methods, they use benching methods, and this is for UK firms. The issue is that Newey and his colleagues, Whitney and Newey, econometricians, have pointed out that you don't get proper identification unless you have a control group of some sort. And so we're able to generate a control group by using net operating losses and how that randomly assigns you on one side or the other side of a kink in the tax code. So that's how we do it. And we also employ a structural model which generates an ability to discern the real responsiveness in terms of real economic activity, the real responsiveness of corporations to tax changes, and the reporting response. Okay, so I'm talking about managing earnings, managing accruals, recognizing revenue, timing the recognition of revenue and costs. Okay? And we find a discernibly more elastic response. So for a 9.1 percentage point change increase in the expected marginal tax rates, U.S. firms decrease taxable income by about 8.9%. That's a big response, and it's discernibly more elastic, and we think our method is actually helping us with the control group get better identification around these kinks with our random assignment using net operating losses. Of this decrease, 3.4% arises from real economic adjustments to the scale of operations, whereas 5.5% arises from earnings management. Okay, so that is an important aspect of this when it comes to firms that are supposed to be, many private firms are supposed to be the engine of economic growth and vitality in a country. This is a significantly elastic response, both in real terms and in reporting terms. We also find our estimates in the structural model suggest that if you cut, hypothetically, a tax rate from 35 to 25%, just hypothetically those two tax rates, then you would get a 16% increase in firm value, which I would also argue is substantial. Okay, so there are interesting things, not that we've firmly forgotten about taxes. We all see M&M on a daily basis in references or wherever it may be. But I think there are interesting things about taxes that we can start to get back to and address. We are also interested in the effects, and this is kind of a governance question. Shareholders and investors will want to understand the extent to when there is a tax change, how much of that tax change is covered by the executive. We're worried about pay, executive pay. How much is covered by the executive, and how much is covered by the firm who pays the executive? And right, the issues here get to tax incidence, they get to the supply, elasticities of demand and supply for executive talent in a very thin market at the top. And so we thought we would take a quick look at this. This is really early, and but let me show you what we found. So if we're thinking about nominal compensation at time 0 or T of the CEO, and let's let G, and this is very common in the pay setting process, consultants go in, they benchmark pay, they get data on last year's pay, they apply a 5% growth rate or a growth rate of G, and depending on where you are in the percentile distribution, they will pay you based on that benchmark. So I'm going to denote the federal tax rate as tau TF, and the state tax rate is tau TS, and I'm pretty sure, I'm not sure about this fully, but changes in the federal and state tax rates tend to be at least relatively exogenous or predetermined when it comes to compensation. So after-tax pay in a period is 1 minus those two tax rates. Let's just assume we're using an average. This is a very coarse experiment, right, as opposed to a marginal tax rate, or we infer the marginal tax rate from where the income is on the tax schedule. And so if I were choosing a Y1 hat that makes you whole based on this year's taxes versus last year's taxes, I would calculate after-tax income there and set it equal to 1 plus G times the tax, the comp last year, and times 1 minus those tax rates previously. So that would mean that I should pay Y1 hat, which is 1 plus G times Y naught times the ratio of 1 minus the sum of those tax rates in each of those 2 years. Okay, so what we do, and this is really early, and this is with Ben Bennett, who's at Ohio State. He's a student of mine. He's going to Tulane to take his first tenure track job this year. And Jesse Wang, who has been at the University of Bern. We regressed log of actual pay minus log of actual pay last year, and we do it on the Y hat, or what you should get paid if you were made whole by taxes. And so the elasticity, the estimate here we get is about 0.38. So 0.38, basically, if there's a change in your tax bill, what the firm is doing is paying about 38% of that, the incidence here, and 62% of that is borne by the executive. Okay? So at any rate, right, there are concerns about expropriation, about extraction of rents, and so what happens when tax rates change? Well, here's a governance question. Taxes matter for governance considerations, and as I say, this is really early, but there's more to do here. So I am trying to persuade you that taxes are, let's get back to taxes a little bit and what we're doing. And so we do another thing, and this is something we haven't done. Actually, it's related to something we've done, but I'm going to put up a short model despite all the prohibitions against that in a form like this, but here it comes. So there's lots on corporate taxes, and some work on personal taxes. We've seen tons of work on corporate taxes and payout policy, and some on personal taxes and payout policy. Certainly capital structure, we all have been taught and continue to promulgate the notion that marginal tax rates matter a lot when it comes to capital structure. On investment policy, we've seen a lot on corporate taxes from the economics literature, for example, Feldstein, Gillis, and other authors, but we've not seen a ton on investment policy and personal taxes. Okay, so I'm going to tell a quick story here. So there's a firm, a stochastic production process. I'm going to have a nice concave utility function, stochastic production process. And you're investing in period 0, and the cost of doing that after tax depends to a shareholder, depends on whether you're a repurchasing or a dividend paying firm. So it's a capital gains, 1 minus the capital gains tax times the amount of investment. That's the cost for share repurchasing firm shareholders, and 1 minus the dividend rate. Okay, and so I'm leaving open the question here whether those capital gains and dividend rates are the same. In fact, since 2003 in the United States, they are not. The rates, dividend and capital gains rates before the 2003 Act were up to 38.6%, and 20% respectively, and 9 to 15% thereafter. So there's a shock there when you can actually investigate some of these questions. So at any rate, so here is the production function, and I've noised it up. So you get I back and a return on I, f of I, that's concave, and you have the square root of I times epsilon. This is a toy model. I'm trotting this out for you to make a simple point. Shareholders discount cash flows at R greater than 0. I've subsumed corporate taxes already, so these are after corporate taxes, tax rates, and the noise, if I discount that back to times 0, is distributed normal 0 sigma squared. Okay? So I am now going to make managers risk averse. So rho, I'm going to use Cara risk aversion, and I'm going to include vega here as conventionally defined in the compensation literature, basically what happens to the value of an award or a portfolio if you change the variance of performance or the standard deviation of performance. Okay, and so I am subsuming this in a primitive way. This is not strictly correct because I'm not integrating overall possible outcomes, but I am, as a heuristic, subtracting that vega from rho. We'll put vega somewhere between 0 and 1, okay? So, sorry, 0 and rho. So I'm also going to introduce another governance characteristic. So I have the derivative in volatility, vega, and I have the derivative in value, which is delta. I'm giving effective ownership of delta. And the question is, how do taxes and governance actually interact in an empirically observable way? So I am taking a quick shortcut. I'm writing the certainty equivalent. This is what the manager is going to maximize if you have car utility and normal distribution. Here's the certainty equivalent, and I have delta, right, my ownership share, times the thing in square brackets, which is 1 minus tau naught times I. Okay, so instead of distributing to me and the other shareholders and calculating a tax adjustment, that's a negative, and the benefit I get is a present discounted value and expectation of the investment. And so that's 1 minus tau 1, f of I plus I. I'm discounting it. Okay, so then I've got a certainty equivalent adjustment, which should look very familiar to all of you. Minus 1/2 rho minus vega, right? Effective risk aversion, delta squared, right? We're squaring things when we've got a variance, and 1 minus tau 1 squared times the scale of investment, I squared of I squared gives me I and sigma I. Okay, so that's the thing I'm going to use to get a first order condition, and the first order condition is up there for you. And so I've got 1 minus f prime of I star. That would normally be 1 plus R. Right? That would be the net present value rule that we're also used to seeing, and used to teaching, and used to promulgating. So rho minus mu is 0, right? No risk aversion. And even if there are taxes, so long as they're symmetric, then we still have the NPV rule. However, if the manager is still risk neutral, so I'm going to offset risk neutrality fully, then taxes still matter if they're asymmetric. So before 2003 in the US, there was a huge investment distortion arising from asymmetry in the tax system. And I don't know, somebody may have worked on this. This is speculative. It's related to something else I'm doing, but this is not what we're doing. And so I think there's an opportunity to do a first order to consider taxes at the personal level and investment policy for repurchasing as opposed to dividend-paying firms. Now I'm dissembling on how you get to be a repurchasing versus dividend-paying firm. I'd love to hear a sensible explanation for that, but I'm not on the hook for that. I'm doing something else, I think. So at any rate, you have an investment distortion purely from the personal tax system. Okay, so now let's get rid of the asymmetry in taxes, just to make sure that it's not the symmetry that's driving the interaction with governance. And so we have 1 there, but then we have the certainty equivalent adjustment in terms of risk. So this is the risk aversion piece, and I have 1 minus tau there, I have taxes, and I have volatility, sigma naught squared, and I have my usual 0.5 out front. But then I have a rho minus vega, and a delta. And so I have, all of a sudden, in a very simple way, governance interacting with personal taxes. So I don't know, I don't know if this will generate empirical traction here, but this is something that at least is new to me. Maybe somebody's worked on this, but this is new to me, and I'm suggesting that this is something we can work on. I am with Nate Seegert and Jason Sandvik. Jason Sandvik is a PhD student at Utah who's also going to Tulane this coming year. I love talking to my two students because I tell Jason, man, Ben is killing it. He is so productive. You better get to work. And then I tell Jason, I tell each of them the same thing. And I'm hoping to generate a horse race. You can only hope to have students as productive as Jim Link or Lalitha Naveen. And I'm hoping to duplicate that again at some point. But anyway, that's the point here. Opportunity to work on governance. My paper with Nathan Seegert and Jason Sandvik is about investment distortions that somewhat resemble this, but when it comes to M&A. Okay? And not that we've done it right, so there's opportunity there for you to do that too. Okay? Last thing, I'm going to do some complaining. Actually, I'm going to complain about Europe in a minute. Just in a second. But I want to talk about the third piece. So now we're going inside the black box. Let's talk about the character of recently issued executive compensation schemes, recently issued compensation packages. So, based on that description, empirical descriptions, I think there's some associated questions that arise from this, and we can figure out what we know and what we don't know, and what might possibly be interesting to work on for those of us who work in compensation. So I'm going to focus on not salary, not bonus, not time-vested options, not time-vested stock, but performance-vested provisions. And these, basically what that means is that there is a vesting provision that is not time-vested. Now, time vesting was far and away the norm in the U.S. 95 through 2001, 13 of 14 grants were time-vested, and that means for example, a very common vesting provision is you get, if I give you 100,000 shares, you get a quarter of that for each of 4 years, so long as you're still with the firm. Or it could be 3-year, or it could be 5-year. The uniform vesting provisions, time-based, were really the norm back in the day. 1 in 14 instead used a performance contingent vesting provision where the number of shares or options you received depended on some performance measure. So not only does the back-end instrument, the options or stock, depend on firm performance, but so does the number of units of options or stock that you will receive. That also will depend on performance. So anyway, these increasingly complex vesting provisions, we saw those. I first became aware of these, a very nice paper, and it's still unpublished as far as I know. Antonio Camara and Vicki Henderson, very nice paper, and I don't know why it's published, but they were reporting work on real earnings performance-based stock options. Okay, so these are stock options with these vesting provisions. So I'm blaming it on the UK. These were FTSE 100 firms. And in fact, I can attribute recent political events such as Brexit to the adoption of these awards. Well, maybe not. Okay, so we have some other work on this, but there is so much to do here, and we haven't done it, and we're not smart enough to do it all. But here are some of the things here with Carr Bettis and John Bishak and Swami Kalpathy. And Lee and Wang, Lee was a PhD student at ASU back in the day. DeAngelis and Grinstein have some stuff on RPE and retention, and by RPE I mean relative performance evaluation. So these performance vesting provisions, so it could be accounting or it could be stock price based, 80%, and this is old data, these are old data, but in 2012, 80% of US firms were doing this stuff. Okay, at least once in a given year, a big US firm. And absolute performance valuation means that the performance metrics, whether it's accounting or total stock return, are defined in absolute terms. Relative performance evaluation means that they're defined relative to an index or relative to peers in an industry. So it could be an index sort of relative performance evaluation, or it could be a horse race. So you pass 3 of those peers, you start to get some shares, something along those lines. And by the way, there was a big mystery in economics of why is RPE not observed? Why don't we have that? The argument for it is so compelling in the agency model. Well, I think it was because we didn't bother to read the proxy statements. I'm just saying it's in the proxy statements, and when we started Incentive Lab in 2002, basically we were just trying to read the proxy statements and collect the data there. It's really messy, it's a horrible task, but there's lots of RPE. Okay, here's a APE provision, Amgen, 2008, 3-year performance period. The number of shares, back in instrument of shares, the number of shares you receive here is given as a function of total stock return annualized over a 3-year period. So in 2011, we're going to check and see how you did. Take the cube root of 1 plus, right? You take the cube root, and we'll locate you on this picture. So ignore all of the clutter on this one. Ex post, what that means is that pay is going to be 0 up to a threshold that bumps, and then you'll have these convex pieces if you have linear performance grant schedule, because you have the square performance embedded in the value of the grant ex post. Okay, so the number of shares depends on total stock return, and so does the value of the underlying instrument. So, so that's one example. Here's an example of relative performance valuation. So this is Elite. It's a this is a US company, and I have tried to, in a very horrible way, try to depict the horse race here. So there are 16 peers identified here for this company. As soon as you pass 6 of them, right? So it looks like 7. As soon as you pass 7, you bump up to 50% of the target. So 82 is 100% of target. That's how many shares. As soon as you pass 7, then it goes up, bump linearly to target, and then it gets a little steeper there, the increments and additional shares, and then there's a ceiling. Once you hit the top 3, you get no more shares. Okay? But, so here's what could happen, right? It's not just your performance, but the performance of all of those peer firms, which is, there are 16 of them. There's a little bit of uncertainty here. That's bouncing around left, bouncing around right in terms of their TSR. It could easily be the case that you have a step function like this. Or perhaps everybody marches out in a nice 10% increment difference, which is the next picture I drew. This is the ex post value schedule. And I wrote this in equal 5% increments on the peers. And threshold kicks in at minus 10%, and then you get some shares, and that's why it's not that steep. But as each increment goes further and further up, as you beat each firm, in the end you have a steeper performance sensitivity ex post. Okay, so this is the ex post value of the grant, depending on your performance holding equal increments constant. Okay, but there's an infinite number of possible outcomes here when it comes to this. Okay, here's my favorite. I can't even draw this. Macy's, also 2008, 3-year performance period. And we're going to measure performance over a bunch of different metrics. So, no shares if 3-year EBITDA is less than 8 billion. Okay? 50%, roughly, we're thinking about the target number of shares here. You could get more or less, but 50% of the target is to be allocated to EBITDA margin. 30% over a 3-year return on invested capital, and 20% based on the number is contingent on total stock return, right? So appreciation and dividends, relative to a group of peer firms. Okay? So that's five Macy's metrics, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 Macy's metrics, 4 Macy's metrics plus TSR for 12 peers. This sounds. Does this look like an easy grant to that? Anyway, I don't know. So all of these, even the simpler ones, there are some tricks to evaluate, especially if you have accounting returns, accounting metrics, because the standard risk neutral, the argument for standard risk neutral methods, that's harder to make. But anyway, these are complex, they're hard to value. How do you measure the actual value? How do you measure the incentive properties in terms of delta and beta? So I put that in green because I think we've got that figured out. We have a JAE in 2018, as Andy mentioned, and we have a 2010 on this, so we think we're okay. In red, do executives, can you tell me, can you find out whether executives have clear line of sight to what they should increase or maximize? How does an executive with a complex grant like that actually know what their economic opportunity is that's presented to them by the company through their compensation plan? Okay. Do HR directors, comp consultants, compensation committees on boards know what they're doing, and do they deliberately implement incentive properties, Delta and Vega, to good purpose for their executives? Anyway, I don't know how to find this out, so that's why I'm saying you should find out. Except for maybe to see board minutes or participate in a board meeting, to be on the comp committee, to be the HR director. How about work for a comp consultant, have Frederick W. Cook let you hang out at their office for a year? This is what Murphy did. He was at Towers Watson at the time, spent a year or two there, learned a lot about comp. So that's one thing. Another thing is that we've spent a lot of time worrying about incentive properties and connecting that to firm performance. We worry about the incentive properties of an important aspect of organization design, compensation, and whether that is complementary or substitutable with other aspects, incentive alignment devices in corporations. And so if we're mismeasuring value, Delta and Vega, then I would argue that we don't actually have good answers to those questions. We're going to have to go back and try it again. So I love executive comp and Equilar, except maybe not. Okay. So that's in red because there's plenty of research opportunity there in my view. Reporting by companies, I think we do something on that in our 2018 JAE. This won't surprise you. So we think we know how to value these things. And in terms of what's reported in the financial statements, the elasticity of what is reported versus what is actually the case based on kind of standard methods, FASB, SEC sanctioned methods, and our own methods when those methods don't apply. The elasticity is like 0.6. So big grants are very much underreported, and smaller grants are not. So we think we have on that. Now, John Bijak, I think, is working on with Swami and Rachel Hayes. Is that right? On this topic, earnings management and threshold, ceiling, and target, and I think they're doing a great job of that. So that's in blue. I'm not sure that's the obvious lowest hanging fruit, but things like, do you use absolute or performance evaluation or RPE? RPE is the way, right? The grant schedule of performance vesting provision is the way that RPE gets into compensation. So now, are you using APE or RPE? Are you using accounting awards, accounting metrics, or stock price-based metrics? And if you're using accounting metrics, why EBITDA margin, EBITDA, and ROIC, et cetera, right? So those are all questions, and we've been working on those, and we haven't figured it out, and that's for somebody to figure out for sure. Okay, that's going to be it for me. Just reminding you kind of where we went, macro, middle, micro, and organization design, and these things are all kind of stitched together partly at their edges, looking from the outside in the black box, sort of poking around at the edges of the black box, and then going inside the black box when it comes to compensation, board structure, governance, and all sorts of aspects of empirical finance. This is my best crack at kind of telling you about what I'm thinking and worrying about, and I'm hoping it's useful for you as you construct your research agendas. Thank you very much.